share some of my favorite ways to use the interactive features in Pear Deck to foster engagement and inform instruction. So when you're ready to create a slide and make it interactive with Pear Deck features, you want to make sure, first of all, that you have the Pear Deck add-on in Google Slides. And then also you want to make sure that you have the Pear Deck Power App, which is an extension that you can find in the Chrome store. And this will make sure that some of those extra features that you're using in your Pear Deck, maybe a GIF, some of those things are visible for students on their end. And so when you're ready to make your slides interactive, you're going to launch that Pear Deck add-on. This window will pop up over on the side. And this is how you can make some of your slides interactive for students in your Pear Deck. I'm going to be talking about each of these features here in order, including some of these premium features, the Draw tool, the Draggable tool that we have access to with our premium subscriptions. And so first, the text tool. It's pretty straightforward, and so nothing mind-blowing. I just wanted to share one trick that I've discovered, and that's when students share a link in the text response, it becomes hyperlinked for you when you're viewing it on your teacher dashboard. This is super helpful to know if you are someone who exports student responses into a spreadsheet. All of those links that they may submit in the text response will then be hyperlinked in that Google Sheet for you. So maybe students are submitting YouTube links or links to other external sites. Maybe they've created a project at the end of a Pear Deck. All that will be hyperlinked in there for you. So a little something I found this year. The second tool is choice. Again, super straightforward. It's literally just multiple choice. So you can make your options, and you can do as few as 2, and then you can customize those. Just a couple of things I've learned, again, using this year. As students are making their selections, if you hover over the responses, a little pop-up appears. So you can see which students made those selections. That's helpful if you're doing a quick formative check during the lesson. You can see which students might need a little bit of redirection or reteaching. Another thing I've learned is that if you are sharing your teacher dashboard screen to show the responses, students will quickly change a response to the more popular answer. So if you want students to have their answers locked in before you share, you'll want to lock the screen at the bottom of your teacher dashboard. And that way students' responses are locked until you unlock it if you want to make changes. So, so that's a little trick in the multiple choice tool. The number interactive is super straightforward as well, possibly using it to rank things, put things in chronological order, maybe make some kind of a scale or a timeline. So maybe you're putting events in order. So lots of ways to use the number feature. Here's another way if you're using a word bank. So numbering 1 through 5 and then having students match the word bank term to a definition. Just a little warning, you can only go up to 5 with your numbers. So if you have more than that for a word bank, you might want to split that into a couple of slides. My new favorite interactive is the website. I always thought it was cool because then you can embed, an external site that you want students to explore during your lesson. But one of my favorite, I'm going to share 2 of my favorite embeddables, which actually really looks nice in the Pear Deck in the student view. So the first one, we call this app smashing, when two tech tools kind of work really nicely together. My very favorite one is Google Maps. So this allows students to explore a place right in the Pear Deck. And so if it's a street view image where they can walk around, then they're still seeing your slide, but they're able to explore that place right there in their screen. So this is actually student view that you're seeing. There is a little trick to make this work so that students can see it. So again, this is using Google Maps, not Google Earth. A lot of it Google Maps and Google Earth have a lot of the same imagery. So you can usually find what you're looking for in Google Maps too, if you originally found it in Google Earth. But to make it visible for students on their end in a Pear Deck, you have to do a couple of things first. So in Google Maps, when you find the view that you want students to access, you'll click the 3 dots at the top. You'll grab the embed a map link. And before it will work in Pear Deck, you have to remove everything before the HTTPS. So it's just a few characters there that need to be removed. And then in your preview, you'll see that the visual will appear. So you can see what students will see. So they're able to access and view that pretty cleanly. My second favorite website recently for embedding into a Pear Deck is wordwall.net. This is an awesome tool for vocabulary. So wordwall.net has a huge kind of a ton of options for games. and you can just pop in some terms, pop in your preferred definitions, and then you choose which game you want it to make for you. So it's super easy, super slick, varies up the way students are interacting with terms, and it looks really good in a Pear Deck. So this is a student view of a word wall game. So just put a little something over on the slide in my Google Slides, and then when I created the game in word wall, I pulled the share link, pasted it in as the website, and then it appears right there for students right in their screen. So it's not a separate tab. They're still in the Pear Deck, and they're interacting with that game. And then later I can go to word wall and I can view their responses there. So two of my favorite website tools. The draw tool I use all the time. This is awesome for a lot of our literacy skills, especially with analyzing, annotating charts. So the draw tool, students get a whole kind of dashboard of colors, of highlighting shades, line tool, and then my favorite is the text tool. So you're not just stuck to the text response, that first feature that I showed. Students can actually respond right on the slides that you created. So that's awesome for annotating. And I'll usually direct students to use the text tool if I want them to use that tool. And so you can see here's where students are not only annotating, they're also drawing right on the slide. I love the highlighter function in the drawing toolbar for them. So sometimes I'll have students create their own key and then they highlight the text according to that key. Students can even use the text tool to create their own key for annotating a text. So lots of ways that you can have students interact with text using the drawing tool. Again, annotating maps. So maybe pulling up an excerpt from a text and asking students to annotate that or visualize that on a map to to see where their comprehension is of the text. Drawing tool also supports chronological thinking. So think timelines, chronological order. So there's lots of ways that you can have students do some chronological thinking with the drawing tool. Maybe we're developing arguments with students. And so this is another example of using the text tool in the drawing toolbar and using the pencil or marker tool to annotate on the slide. Just a little note, one thing I noticed recently, some students were telling me that the text tool wasn't working for them. It wasn't letting them type. And so the fix for that is for them to refresh their Pear Deck screen, and then the toolbar magically worked again. So it's safe to do that. The previous responses aren't lost because Pear Decks are auto-saved. Even if a student accidentally clicks out of the tab, they can click that link again and they're back on the slide that you're sharing, and all of their previous responses are auto-saved. So if you're hearing from students that the text tool in the drawing toolbar isn't working, just have them refresh their screen and it'll pop back up for them. So having students interact with the slide I've created here for a CER. So they'll type out their claim, circle the evidence in the image, and then they'll type out their reasoning. This is from New York Times, what's going on in this picture. Those are super fun to use for practicing arguments. Maybe I've given them a claim and I want them to practice identifying the elements of an argument. So I'll create a key over on the left side, and then they'll use those highlighter shades in their drawing toolbar to show me where those elements are in the claim that I've given them. So I can do a quick check to see if they're able to identify the elements of an argument. And same thing, maybe at the end of a lesson, we want to just review something from the lesson. So giving them an option to choose how they want to show what they learned through drawing. So I love seeing these kids are super creative, and they've got a lot of options there in the toolbar to show and illustrate their learning. And here's another example of not being kind of stuck with just the text response tool, but using the text tool in the drawing toolbar to respond. So they're actually interacting right on the slide that I've created, taking multiple perspectives using that text tool. And again, I'll direct them to use the text tool because some of my students will sometimes try to use like the pen tool to write, and it's really hard to read what they're writing with the text tool, or with the pencil tool. So sometimes you have to direct them to use the text tool. Again, just having students pull evidence from the text using that highlighting feature instead of having them type the evidence out in a text tool, or just having them highlight right on the slide. And here's another example. You can tell the student didn't just have a really steady hand. There's a line tool in the drawing toolbar, so some students use the line tool to underline. Those are our type A students. And visualizing. So perhaps we're practicing our reading comprehension skill of visualizing, and we'll have students draw based on the text. Visualizing data works really well too with the drawing toolbar. So I'll give them the structure or the frame of the chart, and then they'll fill it in based on the text. And the Draggable tool, another all-time favorite that I've been using a lot this year. The Draggable tool, one of the features I love about the Draggable tool is the ability to see, there's 3 different views in the teacher dashboard for seeing student responses. And this is really useful to swap between when you're using the Draggable feature. So you can see list view, which shows you full screen slides of each student. You can scroll through every student's response. Then you've got the grid layout, which shows little mini kind of thumbnails of all the slides. And then the third option is the overlaid layout, and that will pile all the slides one on top of the other so you can see the entire class's responses in a quick snapshot. Those are really powerful for sharing with students to discuss class responses. So this is an example of just list view. It's just one student's response, having them comprehending map keys with the questions. So taking that draggable location marker pin and dragging it over based on the map key. Here's another draggable activity. So maybe I've created a continuum or scale with vocabulary words, and then I've asked them, they'll drag the icons down to show me their understanding of the vocabulary words. And here's another vocabulary activity with example, non-example. So giving them a few draggable icons, and they'll just use the ones that are an example of that word. Same activity, but with images. I could also have students practice evaluating arguments with a rubric. So perhaps I've given them a claim and then I put a snapshot of the rubric in there, and they just take their draggable over. This is an example of that overlaid layout. So this is the entire class's responses. Sometimes I'll share this with them and we can have a little conversation about what we're noticing about our peers' responses, and then move forward with our lesson. Again, here's that overlaid layout, really powerful view of student thinking. So each student had one question mark and one exclamation point, but when I put it in overlaid layout, I can see everyone's responses. And so if I share this with the class, we can talk about, why did so many of us, have a question about this one feature in the image. And I love sharing the teacher dashboard with this because a lot of times students, especially if they're remote, or even in the classroom, they're only seeing their response. And so that overlaid layout view and then sharing the teacher dashboard so they can see it is a really powerful conversation tool, assessment tool. You can see where your entire class is at one point. And then finally, my very favorite use of the Draggable tool is for check-ins. I do this with my attendance every day. So this is actually 2 for 1. This is my attendance. I have 2 slides in my attendance and check-in Pear Deck every morning. One is a drawing slide with a class roster. Students cross off their name only. And here is a snapshot of that overlay view so I can see the entire class, who's here, who's not here, who still needs to mark themselves present. That's a drawing slide. And then the next slide is just a check-in slide. So here's a few different examples. They can see what is the question for the day. Sometimes it's how are you feeling? Sometimes it's a vote, best of, maybe it's a bop or flop song. So they can vote whether the song is a hit or not. And so it's just a fun way to see where kids are at in the morning and get us warmed up for the day. If you're interested in doing check-ins with your students, I have a master file of all the check-ins I've used for the entire school year here at this bit.ly. Feel free to use or modify. And what I'll do then is from this master file, I have separate files for each of my classes so that there's a customized class roster for each of those class periods. And then I launch those individual Pear Decks for the appropriate class. So we've been doing it. It's been working really smoothly, and it gives me a lot of information, ways for students to tell me how things are going. Sometimes I will do a text response or a drawing tool so students can use that text response tool to tell me a little bit more about how their day is going. So hopefully you found an idea or two that you might be able to use right away. If you have any questions or if you just want to brainstorm ways to use the tools, I'm always looking for new ways to use the interactive tools because the options are endless. So feel free to reach out with any questions or ideas. I'm looking forward to chatting. So thank you.